So good evening, everyone. This is the joint meeting between the Board of Ed, the Town Council, and the RTM. Just a couple of just points is that this is a large group, and who is seated around this table will be the Town Council, the Board of Ed, and the members of the RTM Education Committee. Unfortunately, what is not seen is behind the camera. We have many RTM members here, and they also have a mic. And so when we get to that place where we can be asking questions, please feel free to grab the mic and address what your concern is. Which brings me to my next point, which is when you are talking, please make sure that you have a mic. This mic, not that mic, just to be clear. And so if people were having some confusion or some anxiety or some frustration about why we were doing this meeting is really is typically held with the Town Council and the Board of Ed before the Board of Ed finishes the budget process, and we adopt it as our own. Because right now, up until February 28th or until the board votes, this is not the board budget, this is the superintendent's budget. And that we have been going through multiple workshops. In fact, if it seems that the Board of Ed feels a little bit rushed, we are going to be having a workshop after this meeting. And so just to let people know that that's what we're doing after us. So really the purpose is for the Board of Ed and the Town Council and the RTM just begin to have dialogue about the budget process, since the Board of Ed knows that we carry a lot of the budget. We're not the total budget, but we carry a lot of the budget, and it would be important to hear. And once again, this is a historical thing. On a side note, I did not bring my Invisalign with me, and so I am incredibly embarrassed about the fact that I have a missing front tooth, and I smile and make faces that look really weird because I'm embarrassed, which just causes more attention to it. So I needed to get that off my chest. So my understanding is, in terms of the Board of Ed members, we are all here, but Board Member Newson. And Patrice?
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the February 6th special meeting of the Groton Town Council. It is 6:12. Councilors present are Granatowski, Parker, Franco, Aubry, and Schmidt. Absent are Atwater and Zeperi, who notified us, and Baumgardner and Heed are on their way, coming from work.
And good evening. I'm Sima Eben, the moderator of the RTM, and with me this evening are several RTM members. We have Representative Wells, Representative Richards, Representative Hanscom, Representative Katowski, Representative Lambert, Representative Chase, Representative Washington, Representative Sanford, and Representative Powers, and they are sitting behind us. And then from the Education Committee, we have Representative Whitney, Representative Gustafson, and Representative Bordelon. And if I've missed anyone, please let me know. I'll leave it to the town clerk to make a list of who is not here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sima. You do have the daunting task, and I absolutely do realize that. So before we start, let me just kind of ground people. Dr. Grenier does have a slight, that's not what I meant, a short screen presentation, hence the screen behind us. And but before we do that, if we can quickly just kind of introduce ourselves around the table. I know that many of us know each other by faces, but it would be nice to kind of have a name and what body you are from. So I am Kim Shepherdson. I am the chair of the Board of Education.
Ken Knight, Board of Education Business Manager.
Susan Austin, Assistant Superintendent of Groton Public Schools.
Patrice Granatowski, Mayor, Town of Groton.
Sima Eben, moderator of the RTM.
Portia Bordelon, Education Committee, RTM.
Juliet Parker, Town Council.
Katrina Fitzgerald, Board of Ed.
Rita Volkman, Board of Ed.
Rachel Franco, Town Council.
Jim Gustafson, RTM Education Committee.
Mike Whitney, RTM Education Committee, District 5.
Good evening. Leanne Aubrey, Counselor. Want any more?
Hard to follow. Rita Schmidt, Town Council.
Andrea Ackerman, Board of Ed.
Jay Whiteloff, Board of Ed.
Jane Giulini, Board of Ed.
Lee White, Board of Ed.
Rosemary Robertson, Board of Ed.
Dan Gajewski, Student Representative to the Board of Education.
Sam Kilpatrick, Facilities, Board of Ed.
Mike Ranier, Superintendent.
Okay, and I also just want to say thank you to the town staff that kind of made all the mics and this whole thing possible. So once again, Sean, to you and your staff.
So hopefully this mic works and I can kind of twist myself around here a little bit. I'm just going to take 5 minutes and kind of, this was part of a public presentation, but probably wouldn't be a bad idea to orient everybody. The first thing we want to make sure everyone understands is that the budget that we're in right now, this is not next year's budget, this is the budget this year. What we did last year was we cut site budgets and operational budgets to the tune of about $650,000. So we're, in effect, we're $650,000 down this year. The equipment account went from $490,000 a year before to $44,000 this year. So we are, of course, in not great shape with equipment. And we last year we used a health insurance reserve account of about $650,000. So the budget, because we needed to meet MBR last year, the budget was reduced by about $1.8 million. So just some quick highlights. The first one, of course, is we maintain class size, and I've got a slide about that. But basically, class size is about 20 children to a class. This budget restores the site budgets. Last year, as I said, we cut that $650,000 there, that first one. We have restored, at least hypothetically, we've restored the site budget so that the principals, instead of having just 75% of their budget this year, we're hoping it will be restored to last year's 100% amount. We will continue to enhance literacy, our program through the Writers and Readers Workshop and classroom libraries that we've maintained. We will continue to implement math workshops. The town has an agreement. We pay for 80% of the school resource officer. That's at the high school. That's in the budget. That's in my budget. We are upgrading aging classroom technology and infrastructure. And you can imagine in nine buildings, well, 10 counting the central office, we have an awful lot of infrastructure. So having $44,000 for equipment is really problematic. We will retain this budget retains all curricular and extracurricular programs, and we now have an online program that we're really happy with that is providing enrichment and remedial support for our students. We will continue to support our elementary magnets, Catherine Kolnowski and Northeast Academy. We have started and will continue a one-to-one initiative, a computer Chromebook initiative at the high school. We are continuing to enhance our vocational programs for the young adults, the program that's in the central office, partly. We will support, there's a big nationwide, certainly statewide for us, movement towards the next generation science standards. So the tests are completely different. So we need to prepare the children for the curriculum, and so we are working hard on that and the materials. We're going to continue the elementary enrichment programs. We actually are, after school programs, we're going to expand them to the middle schools in this proposed budget. And we will maintain high quality, the Treehouse program, which we now have expanded to another school. It's now at S.B. Butler and doing really quite well. So here's just a quick history. 8 years. The last 3 have been 0. 5 of the last 8 have been 0. And So over that 8-year period, it's a little less than 2/3% increase. So here's the proposed budget. Ken, did you distribute your? Yeah, okay, so we'll give you a chance, and I've got some more detailed slides here. But I always like to say that public school budgets nationwide fall into 8 categories. Salaries, benefits, purchase services, that is to say the services, educational services that we provide, not through our staff. We hire others, like for example, occupational therapists and physical therapists and so forth. Property services, that's the maintenance folks. Transportation, it's a big category, the 500 series. Communications, insurance, tuition, that's a big account. That's, you see, $11 million. The supply account, you notice FY19 had $2.8 million, and we're hoping to get up to $3.4 million. It looks like a very large increase, but of course, that 628,000, that's an attempt to get back to even. It actually doesn't get us ahead, it just gets us back to where we were last year. The equipment account, as I said, is for a $76.5 million organization. We have $44,000 for equipment. And that's a couple of Xerox machines that could break, and it could cost us $44,000. So we're trying to, there's a huge increase, of course, of 539%, because we're trying to get back. We're only about halfway there, but we're trying to crawl our way back to where we were last year. And dues and fees, again, is a little bit of an increase because we cut CABE and Connecticut Association of Boards of Ed, and we cut the National School Board Association, so we've restored that back. So the idea is that the budget would need to increase by $1.9 million, which is pretty close to the $1.8 million that we cut last year. So when I think about it, we are trying to get back to last year's budget, and so I think the 1.8 to 1.9 million dollar is kind of not a coincidence. I sometimes hear what percentage the board is of the budget, and of course the board. Let me go to the next slide. The town budget, that middle number there, is $125 million. Well, at least it was this year. Of that amount of money, the town has to raise taxes. That's the tax burden. And so the tax burden, at least for last year, was $87,497,584. So the board's budget of 76 would be a huge percentage of that. But the education does not cost that, because, as you can see at the top there, the revenues that go right to the town, well, of course, there's a $25 million grant from the state. Other state funds are about 310. We get federal impact aid of about 3.2 million. Special ed excess costs comes in at about 800. Oh, and all these, of course, go to the town, Medicaid and other. So the town picks up $29.5 million to offset the education budget. So one way of looking at it is, of the essentially $87.5 million that was raised from the local tax base, about 54% of that goes to education. Sometimes I've heard numbers that they're quite large, but the truth of the matter is the board represents, because we the Board of Ed, generate $29.5 million, we actually are about 54% of the tax burden. This is just a quick slide, which is a reflection of virtually every public school budget in the country. Public schools essentially provide teachers for children. And the next slide I'll show you exactly how we provide those teachers. But about 77% of our budget are for the people, the teachers, the custodians, the administrators, the paraprofessionals, anyone who works with the children. And then another 8% goes to tuition. About $5 million goes for transportation. It's an expensive operation to get essentially 5,000 children around this town. So one of the way, well, you can see the percentages. So the discretion is about 4.4%. Or the way I like to think about it is, if you take special ed, salary account, insurance account, and transportation, that's 70 million of the 76 million. There's not a whole lot of money left over. You know, people often think of a $76 million budget. I actually think about $70 million of fixed costs. You know, unless we want to have, well, let me get to this next slide. Unless we want to have far more children per class, which would not be, certainly would not be recommended educationally, it would, in many cases, it wouldn't even be practical. We couldn't get 30 students in some of these classrooms. They're just not designed to have 30 students. It would not be educationally sound, as I said, but even physically it would be almost impossible. But as you can see, our numbers, average class sizes, the pre-K classes of 16, kindergarten classes of 17.7. These are the actual projections for next year. 20, 21, 19, 20. And then you get to the middle schools where it's a little bit higher, 23. It depends on the year, 2018. And then at the high school, these are just the core classes. We have music classes that, of course, are much larger, and we have some special ed classes that are much smaller. But overall, it's about 20 children to a teacher in a classroom. That is, in fact, the foundation of the school district. I'm going to try to do this. I know Representative Kotowski is here, and we did a little chart, and I'll try to do a little more detailed one next week. But what I realized was the public is aware, I think, that the board, not the town, the 29 million that goes to the town, that goes to the town. These dollars go to the board, and there are two kinds of dollars that come to the board. One kind of grant is called a categorical grant. You get it because you're in that category. That is to say, we don't apply for it. So the first one is Title I. It's nearly $1 million a year that takes care of remedial services for 3 of our schools that have the highest percentage of free and reduced children. Title II is professional development. It's a little bit smaller, about $130,000. Title III is for English language learners. That's a very small grant. Title IV is to support student progress and academic enrichment. Carl Perkins is a vocational tech grant. School readiness is a grant that supports early childhood programs and preschool programs, but not in our schools. We actually use the money. It's a pass-through. It goes through Children First Groton, and they provide tuition-free programs for children throughout the community. The IDEA, Individual with Disability Education Act, that's the special ed grant. That comes in at a little bit more than $1 million. It pays for about 5% of the special education budget, which is a bit of a frustration for those of you who know anything about federal promises, that it should be significantly higher than 5%. The bilingual is a very tiny grant. The board, at least now, the board gets this directly. Department of Defense Supplemental Impact Aid. The way this works is if you have more than 20% of your children, when you apply for impact aid, which is through the federal education department, and that $3.2 million comes right to the town. If the school system is more than 20% children, the federal education department transfers those figures to the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense gives a modest grant of about $250,000, about $250,000 a year. And the board for years has been using that to provide computers for kids. Basically, that's how they've used it. But the board has only used what we get in a particular year. We don't dip into that, thinking it would be unwise. but this year we got about $260,000. So in terms of categorical grants, the grants that the board gets because it is the Groton Board of Education with the student population that we have, it comes to about $3.1 million. On top of that, we apply for competitive grants, and sometimes we get them and we're happy, and sometimes we don't get them. So the first one is the Magnet School Assistance Program. That is a 5-year grant. We're in year 2. And there are 3 components of it. The first one is to bring the middle years program to both of our middle schools. It's an expensive proposition to train all the teachers, so we got $130,000 this year that we've allocated for the teaching and supplies and so forth. The second part of that grant was to start a STEM program at the west side, and we got $346,000. It's paid for some staff, it's paid for some coordinators, it's paid for lots of equipment, and so we're sort of up and running. It's a federal education grant, by the way. And then there's, of course, at Cutler, there's an arts and humanities, and there's $336,000, again, for an arts coordinator, supplies, materials, artists in residence, and so forth. So whatever you hear about the arts program or the STEM program, that's what's paying for it, essentially. The next 3 are grants that we wrote because Groton has the 20% military children. We become eligible nationwide for Department of Defense Education Activity, or DODEA. And they come out with a theme every year. So 3 years ago, or was it 4 years ago? 4 years ago, the theme was writing. And so we decided that we would try to put a little program together that would have teachers from Columbia University come and help with our writing program. And we were awarded the grant. And so this year, for the literacy program, we received $195,577. 2 years ago, the theme was math. And we put another program together, and much to our glee, we were selected. In fact, we were #1 in the country 2 years in a row, and we got this grant, and that was to bring in essentially math specialists, math professors, math materials. It's really helped our math program. And so this year, that grant yielded $274,000. And then last year, the Department of Defense Education Activity, the theme was STEM. And so we, with some degree of reluctance, wrote another grant, not thinking we would get 3 in a row. And so we put together an outdoor STEM program, which was really interesting for the children. Summer and evening activities, STEM. But we also put together a program for the high school, which, and the high school has about 20% military children, so they were eligible, that would provide an international baccalaureate program, but in this case, not the diploma program, which is academic, focus on academic, but this one is to focus on careers. It's called a career-related program. So we applied for engineering, culinary arts, and business, at least initially, and nursing, thank you, 4 of them. And so our teachers are being trained. So what would happen is the children would be able to take only 2 international baccalaureate classes and 4 course sequence in engineering, culinary arts, nursing, or business, and they would get an international baccalaureate certificate. So not necessarily for the college-bound students, but it really gives somebody a leg up. So this year, these are FY19, that is to say, this fiscal year, because we don't exactly know what we're going to get next year, because we keep applying. We apply all the time, as long as it fits our goals. So the competitive grants for this year is $1.5 million. And so that gives us a total of $4.6 million in grants. Now, let me see if, so the kind of our what we're trying to do is provide a rigorous curriculum and effective engaged instruction. But I'm gonna ask the second part that I really wanted. I wanted the municipal officials to know is the board submitted at the bottom there. You see, way at the bottom, $2,845,000. We submitted, and I'm actually gonna, if I could find it, there we go. I'm gonna send half one line, maybe, and half the other. We wanted everybody to see exactly what we submitted. And I'm mindful that the town, John and I talk about stuff like this all the time. Town funds are limited, so I don't necessarily mean that the Board of Ed would receive $2,845,000 worth of capital improvement projects. So we had a little talk the other night, and we tried to figure out what were the top priorities. So the first thing I wanted to do is ask Mr. Kilpatrick just to kind of walk us through briefly what these capital improvement projects are.
They get them all the way to the back?
Does everyone have a sheet of paper of this? All right.
Do you want to say that?
No, we do not have a.
I'm going to send the whole thing to everybody tomorrow.
As we were just going to say, it's all going to be mailed out digitally to everybody, so for the minutes, the clerk will have it as well.
All set? Okay. So you see in the first block.
Before you go on with this, I just have a quick question. I believe for special education, doesn't the state reimburse us for students who are outplaced up to a certain, I don't think we mentioned that. I thought that was federal.
No.
Where is the state one?
That is sped excess cost, the fourth item down.
Okay, under the revenues.
That money goes right to the town. So I was making the distinction. Some money goes to the town, some money goes to the board.
And isn't that one of the possible reductions that last year the governor had asked for it not to go to the towns? Yes. So in the future, we may or may not, depending on what the new governor does with his budget in February. Yes. So that it's quite a bit of money. So
yeah.
it was just like,
yeah, it's about $1 million nearly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So moving back to the asbestos removal, the first item is Fitch High School, and we've requested $370,000 to continue the project at Fitch High School. You'll notice on the right it says that in fiscal year 16, $370,000 was approved. The other half we were hoping to get so that we could do the entire school in one summer, because there are a lot of activities, guidance things that go on in the high school. So to shut down the high school for an entire summer is a major undertaking and a great distraction to many clubs and the guidance department, administration, and so forth. So, of course, that money from fiscal year 16 needs to be spent by this summer. So if we don't get that approved, we'll probably be asking that we continue to get that money or move it forward another year so that we could do it all in 1 year. Also, SB Butler, we've asked for $275,000 to do the asbestos at SB Butler. Now, everybody knows that SB Butler is slated to be closed with the 2020 project. However, the state would allow us to remove the asbestos from the building while it's still a school and not penalize us should we close it thereafter. My idea is to get it out of there again next summer so that when it's closed and you decide to do with the building what you decide, whether it becomes a community center or is sold off or whatever you do with it, then we would, as a town, we would at least get reimbursed for half of the money while it's a school. But if we just turn it back over to the town, that asbestos would come out at somebody else's expense, either the towns or the people who purchased it. And again, the thinking would be that if you were purchasing a building like that with asbestos in it, it would be worth less to that purchaser. Moving on to Fitch High School athletics. The tennis courts, the winters have been the frost heaves and so on and so forth. The cracks in the tennis courts continue, and the water flow underneath have caused quite a bit of damage there. We've repaired them in-house, but they do need a major overhauling. The gym floor, the project would include sanding it down and repainting the floor. And the football field resurfacing. The football field should have a crown in it so that it drains toward the sidelines. That crowning is long past, and the field condition is not the greatest at this point. The Mary Morrison parking lot you've heard about previously. There's $80,000 set aside for planning, or we're requesting. We had asked Public Works, the last time the town council asked me to talk to Public Works about doing it. They thought they could do it that winter. However, other projects came up and they weren't able to get to that planning. So until we do it, we thought we would ask for that. And of course, the construction of the parking lot would be about $420,000 estimated. The district storage facility to replace the Pleasant Valley frame building. The wood frame building that was classrooms back a few years ago when there were a lot more Navy kids here is now used for storage. If that building is sold off, and with that, the Pleasant Valley School along with the frame building, then we would lose our storage facility, and we would need something. Now, last year it was requested for $300,000. We have since had the engineer come down and take a look at the property. We'd like to put it on at Flanders Road, and the site work there is a lot more difficult than it looks like it would be. There's actually a rise about 5 feet in slope in that section of the building, so it would be an additional money there for the site work. Northeast Academy and Catherine Kolnaski schools. The glue lams are the wood beams that are they're glue laminated beams, wood beams. They're outside the building, and they are in a condition that really they need to be sealed up again. So that would be about $55,000 per school. It's about 10 years old now, and that was recommended. Claude Chester Elementary School. We have a fuel tank that is required to come out by state law. That oil tank can be in the ground for 30 years and then it has to come out, and that tank has to come out this next year. So we're asking for the $30,000 to do that. There's a request for a district-wide phone system to upgrade the phone system, and we have actually applied for a matching grant, a security grant. We talked with the people at the security grant, and they indicated that a phone system would be acceptable, and so we've applied for that, and it's a 50-50 matching grant. So if we get that, then we'd be looking for about half of that money. And then, of course, the water service needs, $150,000 was for the construction work that might be needed for redoing the piping, et cetera, if it became necessary with regard to the lead in the water situation. Since we last met, we've actually we're dealing with a different person at the State Health Department, and she has recommended that we actually do our testing in a more advanced way, and we've been pretty fortunate that the items that we've taken care of at Fitch High School and Claude Chester School this past, just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I got a phone call from Groton Utilities indicating that the work that we did in-house, recommended by the state, actually those tests came back non-detectable for lead in those areas. So That included the lavatories that were in the high school that tested positive, and the fountain at Gloucester School. So her recommendation now is to move on to the field house, so we're working on that. We were down there today starting to work on that. So I think that we're thinking that we would probably not ask for that $150,000 to do the construction work, because we're going to be working on...
Let me hop to your chart, because the board met last night, and as I said, John gave me a heads up that there might be some limited funds here, so... Thank you. That there might be some limited funds. And so the board had a lengthy discussion about this, but the board didn't take a vote. I don't want to represent this like it's the gospel, but you'll notice in the column there I have 4 numbers. The Gloucester tank is number 1. We need to do it. The second thing is we need to fix the beams of the schools. Otherwise, they're going to rot and fall down. So we don't want that to happen. Number 3, we really need to do something about the tennis courts. We've fixed them. We've sort of pasted them over, and they keep cracking. And of course, the liability is we have competitive tennis, and of course we have Park and Rec, and we have camps there and everything. And so this is something we really need to take care of. And then number 4, I just say as a Groton resident, if we can remove the asbestos from SB Butler and the state is willing to pay for half of it, then I say do it. Don't wait for the school to close, because then the state won't. So the 275, the town council would have to agree to the 275, but it would only be 50%. Whatever half of 275 is, I guess 130 something, 137. So for 137, it would make sense to me that we would do this, and we've gone about our business. Everything else, I mean, Sam just explained why everything is on the chart, but unless Pleasant Valley is sold and they take that storage facility, if that happens, we're in big trouble. But please God, that won't happen. We can live with the football field for another year. We could live with this is me talking. But the top 4, I think the town ought to do. I think it's very important. And well, that's all I'm going to say. Now, the last thing we wanted you all to know is the board, this is new to the board because we have some developments, because Ken was able to talk Mr. Whiteloff to Ms. Landry, the finance director. So we have a little different story. The Board of Education has an account, obviously we're self-insured. We have an account that when the money, it's about a $14 million account. When the money we set aside for our health insurance, if we have a good year, the guess is it's going to cost $14 million. If it costs a little less than $14 million, it actually stays in a health insurance reserve account. Some of you may painfully remember when I first got here, the board was $1.4 million in the hole. The first day I arrived, I was told that the budget is $1.4 million in the hole because they cut too much from the health insurance reserve. So I've always been very careful about the health insurance reserve because I don't want it to tap it irresponsibly, because it's not this year I'm worried about, it's next year. That is to say, it's not FY20 I'm worried about, it's FY21. Because if we take too much out, and Ken will explain it a little bit, we will have a huge mountain to climb. And then we're going to, come looking for a $3 million, some huge increase, and we don't want to do that. So, could you kind of talk us through this chart, please?
And we know that you don't have the chart. It will come to you with everything else.
Right. So on the far right is this is what we anticipated in the FY19 budget. We started out this year at around $4.1 million. that we actually added to the reserve during the year FY18. And we anticipated using part of that reserve in last year's budget, about $684,000. So. Yeah, the 3.4, that's where we anticipated being per our budget. As we look now, we're 6 months into FY19, and our experience has been a little bit better. We anticipate only having to use this $364,000 of the reserve, which is better. However, here, OPEB, that stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. It's to provide health benefits for our retired folks. That is another reserve that we have to also fund. And that particular reserve, we were in the hole last year about $668,000. We just got the report last week, and now we're in the hole by $807,000. So our best efforts, we're trying to pay this down. We paid extra last year. We paid the actuarial contribution amount, but still it went in the wrong direction. So our recommendation at this point is to put another $400,000 into that reserve to help get us out of that hole. So now our thinking is for this year, we would anticipate, a little red dot is, but we would anticipate that our reserve will end somewhere around $3.373 million. So a little bit less actually than what we had budgeted. This column, last column on the left, is based upon the budget that we have in front of us. It starts out at that $3.373 million, and this budget contemplates an additional reduction of about $500,000. So based on all this, and these are all estimates, but based upon this, we would anticipate our reserve balance to be around $2.9 million at the end of next year. And just so we know, the FY20 budget contemplates our payment to OPEB, but if that continues to go in the wrong direction, that may need to be increased as well.
I don't know how the moderator and the mayor wants us to do we want to recognize our own people, or, because I know Conrad and I know that Portia has both raised their hands.
Right, so what I would prefer is, that's what I was just going to ask, if all of you have presented all the information you wish to. Can you give us some idea of how much time we're looking at here before your next meeting begins?
About 35 minutes.
Okay, so we can pace ourselves then. Yeah. Okay, so yes, I would prefer to, whoever you want to recognize, I'll recognize. Moderator Eben can recognize.
Okay.
So I didn't see hands. Who did you see?
Conrad.
I'll recognize Councilor Heed.
Two quick questions. For the town manager, we just applied for, and I believe we're going to get a grant for brownfield funding for the Groton Heights School of about $200,000. So my question with the the asbestos removal, why would you remove it from a closing building when you can remove it from an existing building? From one that we're going to keep using.
Well,
why would you want to do that?
We have already removed the asbestos containing materials from the active schools. The SB, we did Colchester last summer. The idea is that while it's an active school, it's a code violation, and the state will pay about 54%. So that's the answer to the question. Once it closes, then the total cost of the removal must be borne by the town.
There definitely is a chance that we might be able to get a grant later as we go through a development process similar to the $200,000, but you never know what kind of funding the state will have, of course. But it is a possibility later. Another thought I had too is I've only got about $2.5 million total for CIP to submit, and with over $6 million in requests.
Yep.
I could definitely do the top, obviously the council, will do what they want to do, but in terms of what I submit to the council, the top two are definite. Be a stretch to get 3. I can't get the 4 in on top of that and remotely fund the barest necessities of what else I have. But I wonder if you're not going to do the high school at this point, if you really thought, I think it's probably better waiting off, but another option is you could take that $370,000 if the council that's already there and move it, some of that towards doing the SB Butler, if you're not going to do Fitch High right now. But I suggest waiting and we'll see where we're at next year. Or
we
for
certainly want to
later,
work on Fitch, because obviously that's a school that contains asbestos, and we want to get it out of there.
But just where I might be able to get in the top 3, but that's about what will be in my CIP.
Moving that money from the high school to SB Butler would not be my recommendation, because the conditions at the high school are more immediate than they would be at SB Butler. SB Butler, a lot of that is covered with carpeting right now, so it's essentially encased, while the high school has tiles that are at a state that are very close to being of a great concern. So I'd try and keep it there.
One more thing to bring up too is the Northeast Academy moisture issue. The engineering's still ongoing, something to keep in mind. I was going to put through, we have to send the CIP to the Planning Commission. I think it's going on the 26th. I was going to put a placeholder in there, at least to have, something in there in case numbers do come through. So it's another thing we'll have to think about if that does come through.
I've been gently pushing the engineer to give us some sort of an estimate, and nothing has been forthcoming. But a placeholder would be great,
because it has to go through. It has to be in that PC Planning Commission list in order to be able to consider it. So
I see.
wanted to do
That'd be great. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to follow up on Councillor Heed's question. You said, Dr. Grenier, that it's a violation to have asbestos in the schools, and I thought you indicated that Fitch had been completed, so I'm not quite understanding why Fitch isn't a higher priority than SB Butler. Did I miss something?
Fitch is a higher priority than Butler. Okay. We already have $370,000. That's already been allocated. But to do the whole of the high school, we need it's a $740,000 project. But to do the whole of the project would take another $370,000. And
do you get the state match on that too?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we get.
So it's more than $740,000. Then it's. Or
no,
would you
it's $740,000, but the town would only pay $340,000. But you have to bond it. Does that make sense?
So you have to have the money up front, and then you'll get reimbursed for 54%.
But the other thing I would want you to know is what Sam just said. It depends on where the asbestos is and the condition. So if it's in a carpeted area and it's not being exposed, it's encased, that's okay. The areas in Fitch High School we believe are of a much higher priority.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to recognize Representative Bordelon, who I believe had a question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I had a quick question in regards to the net health insurance reserve. I attended the meeting last night, the budget workshop, and the form that I have in reference to the form that's presented, it's just a little bit different, so the numbers look a little...
because of the OPEB number.
Oh, so you added OPEB, that's the only difference?
Well, we just had the meeting today.
Okay, that's why I'm asking, because it's a lot different. In regards to the CIPs, I just really hope that in future, when we're building new construction in this town, that we consider maybe this would be not something that we'd want to lean towards, looking at the exterior structure being so delicate on a very new building and making sure that the future buildings that are being built will not need this type of maintenance. Looking at these CIPs, I mean, the whole list is, a bit of a priority. The football field needs to be capped. If we're going to continue as a competitive town, we keep saying we have IB program or we want to bring in students from out of town, well, you're going to have to attract them on a lot of levels. And number one is making sure our campus is up to date, is clean and safe. The football field is not safe. It is the water puddles down there. The drinking water is not safe down there, which I heard is being addressed. That's not very attractive. And the field, just like the tennis courts, is used by the whole town. That's where our students graduate from and what have you. And I'm sad to hear that that one was not a priority. Mary Morrison, my kids are no longer there, and this has been something that's been going on as a paraprofessional when I worked in the town and having students that attended that school. I don't know how many times I almost seen students get hit, including myself, young elementary preschool kids running. Is this a building slotted to be closed?
Not currently.
Okay, so I'm a little concerned as to why this wasn't in the top 4 pick, looking at the longevity list here of how many times it was requested. The people in that area need some relief. That is a DODEA school. That is a military school. Maybe the funds from DODEA could help over there or something. I'm not sure. But that's something that should be addressed. Moving down to the water, it looks like things are moving along, but I feel like we should continue ongoing testing and also coming up with a plan as to how we're going to readdress the allowable level spigots that are still spitting lead water. What is our plan to correct those, and how often are we checking those to make sure that they don't go above the allowable level? Thank you.
I don't know how you want to handle, or are we just doing food for thought, or did you want to reply?
Yeah, we just really want to hear what you all
Okay.
think.
I mean, that's
Great.
That's the whole purpose of this
Excellent.
conversation, is to kind of hear what people are thinking about in terms of.
Excellent. So then I'll go back. Is there another counselor who'd like to ask a question? Then we'll hand it back to Moderator Moderator Sima, sorry. We'll turn it back to Moderator Eben to recognize someone. Any counselor? I can't see Counselor Parker down there, so if you wanted to ask anything.
I did, but I forgot it. So.
Okay, Counselor Franco.
Is this working? All right. We have I guess, a group that's going to be checking on what the goals are for empty buildings, including the school buildings. Do you have Mr. Burt, do you have an idea of when they might have goals for each empty building?
It'll be a while. We're just starting that process, and the Fitch Middle School, former Fitch Middle School, is a higher priority for those that aren't already available. But you have any particular schools in mind, or?
Well, like they're trying to talk about SB Butler, and if our goal is to maybe close that and demolish it, I don't know why we would invest money in it prior to that. Or if we're going to sell it as is and let somebody else deal with it.
That's part of what we'll consider, but
You're
like
not
you
gonna have
said,
an
there
answer.
might be an option for brownfield dollars similar to Groton Heights.
And I understand that everything can't be a priority, so it's really hard to pick from here. Do you know, well, the moisture issue, you're working on that, and do you think you're going to have an answer before you submit your
we will have an
budget?
answer. The engineer's been there several times. The first thing they're really looking at is the HVAC system. But there's also a civil engineer because we believe that the site itself perhaps is not properly drained.
Right.
And so there's the HVAC analysis of that system. And that could give rise to, I don't want to speculate, but that could give rise to, we need another unit to properly heat and cool that place. And then there will be perhaps some sort of civil engineer that's going to say that we need to remediate that site because it is so damp. Yeah, as soon as we know, we will make that clear.
Just from my perspective, if you get pricing on that, that might be one of your top 3, as it might be an immediate health concern to children in the school.
Well, I've politely requested, Mr. Kilpatrick has been very patient with me. Every week I say, what do they say? Because I wanted to get something on the table.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Parker.
Could you clarify what you said about Fitch and the asbestos removal? It's going to be a total of $740,000.
Right. We have $370,000 in the bank.
Okay.
We need another $370,000 to finish a $740,000 project.
Okay. And it's also reimbursable? Reimbursable?
Correct. Yes.
54%.
54% of it. Okay.
Can I add it while we're talking about that? I have
Sure.
another thought on it. Do you know what the timeline is for reimbursement? You have to complete the whole thing, then you submit for
Yes.
reimbursement. Do you know what the timeline is?
Well, they have a new system now, but once the board accepts the project that's closed, it's now a monthly system. I would say it'd be expeditious.
One thought I had is we have about 1 million in fund balance in our CIP fund. I only feel comfortable permanently taking out 500,000 out of that, which I'm already going to be doing. But if it was reimbursable, it might be worth doing this, knowing that 54% would come back to that fund, as long as I knew for sure. So it's something we should continue discussions on for Fitch. So.
We have to actually file. Yeah. Well, what we would do is we would file for the project. We would say, the town has approved in this case the $370,000. They would then send us a commitment letter that will pay you 53.2%, whatever it is. Yeah.
So let's continue to discuss that.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I recommend? Oh, Sima, I'm sorry.
No, I had a question, and I was going to just see if any other RTM members, I guess Representative Whitney has a question, but if I might ask one question quickly, which is about the district storage facility to replace the Pleasant Valley frame building. I don't understand how a system that has so many vacant buildings or buildings that are going to be vacant, in addition to the Fitch Middle School, can't any of those buildings be used? I can't for the life of me see building a new building when we have a plethora of existing buildings that seem like they would store stuff just fine.
It's a good question. When the board finishes the use of a building and we turn it over to the town has always requested, my experience is Fitch Middle, that it be cleared out. So we take the records, we take the books, we take whatever. So in the case of William Seeley's school, for example, as you know, the town used that for some other some park and rec type of things. But when the board turns over SB Butler, well, Pleasant Valley is a good example. So the board has not yet turned over Pleasant Valley because we'll heat it for the winter. We had it in our budget, but we have essentially taken everything out of that building so that when it goes on the sale block, it's not burdened with like 8,000 things inside. So we have been requested to not use vacant buildings as storage facilities. I guess that's it. I guess that's
yeah.
right.
And then in terms of the Pleasant Valley storage building there, I mean, preferable, we'd like to have that whole lot. It's not 100% though. Mr. Kilpatrick's going to take me and Gary Schneider for a tour so we can see what kind of materials are in there. Can some of that be cleaned out? Really get a better idea of what kind of volume we're really talking about. So we'll be looking at it a little more.
I mean, it was my understanding that Fitch Middle had a huge wing that wasn't even being used because of whatever issues that, as for storage, I don't think health issues are a problem, are they?
If that, God forbid, if that storage facility was taken away, we have no place for records. We have no place for furniture and that sort of thing. But if we can certainly look at that. And, maybe a place like SB Butler could be designated for a period of time as a storage facility. It's a little bit tricky because the town wants to sell it or do something.
And in terms of Fitch Middle, we're still putting a plan together. Could departments be moved there to reduce other buildings, and that might free up something else. So it's a process. We don't want to jump right to designating Fitch Middle.
Can I recognize a board member before an RTM? Thanks. I would like to recognize Jay Wheatlock.
I just wanted to quickly address the issue with the NEA and Catherine Kolnaski. We were as surprised as everyone else was about a year ago when we determined that these need to be refinished. And so Mr. Kilpatrick has spoken several times with the Permanent School Building Committee to try to make sure that future buildings are practical. I mean, as nice as Northeast and CK look with this wood laminate, it is not practical to keep going back and refinishing these every 10 years. So this is not new on our radar, and we have asked him to be proactive on these future schools that they not have all that sort of impractical decoration. And I think the board was trying to say, I believe, about SB Butler was, even if you demolish that building, I'm told you have to remove the asbestos first. You can't send a company in and just knock a building down that has asbestos in it. So the town at some point is going to spend $275,000 plus to remove that anyway. Or they're going to have to reduce whatever they can charge for that building by at least that much for a contractor who knows he's got to do that work. However, my personal opinion, and I obviously don't speak for the board, is I'd rather see the money be spent at Fitch, and we've advised the town that it would be in your best interest to spend that money. It would have been great to do that with Fitch Middle. I go into Fitch Middle and I find tape on the tile. I mean, I don't think that's really made it safe for the kids to be in that building. It would have been nice if years ago we had done the remediation at Fitch Middle with an eye toward either using it for a public use or demolishing it. And so now we're paying the price with kids in a building that has lead in the water and asbestos in the tile. However, personally, I'd rather see spending the money on Fitch, and then the town can address that down the road with whatever they want to do with SB Butler. And my understanding is we did have a storage facility at Fitch Middle, and under a previous administration, we were told to remove all of that because when we turn a building over, we do have to clear it all out. And so my understanding is the town council could very easily break this very small piece off of the northeast the Pleasant Valley parcel so that we don't have to go through building a new building or taking back another town building, and that would be the easiest. So, thank you.
I'd like to recognize Representative Whitney.
Thank you. My question is about projected student enrollment over the next few years. I'm wondering if the growth in EB, what effect that'll have. And my concern there is our middle school that we're building new, will that still be big enough? Will we be able to maintain these class sizes around 20 or so? And then currently, there's pressure at Cutler with the 6th grade is about 24 students per class. Is that class that my daughter's actually in going to move forward, packed in like that, as long as they're in Cutler, or is that going to change? And then also Northeast Academy in general is above this average. I'd say just by thinking about it, it's probably 23, 24 per class. And is that something that Northeast Academy is going to continue to exist like? Thank you.
Well, let me answer your questions in order. The enrollment in Groton has remained incredibly stable, about 5,000 children. About 500 children attend magnet schools in the area. So about 4,500 attend our schools, and the board pays tuition for the other 500. So it's been about, give or take 100 children, been about 5,000 children. When we build, the second part of your question is, when we build the new middle school, we built it at the time when it was approved by the state for 947 students, if my memory serves me correctly. I think the enrollment right now is about 970 students. So it's actually a little bit bigger than what we planned. But in terms of the seats, when you count the STEM labs, the science labs, and the regular classrooms, there are, I think there are like 1,500. So we will, the capacity of 1,500. Not that you'd want 1,500 students in that school, but we will be able to handle, the answer to your question is yes. The second part of Groton 2020 is to construct 2 new elementary schools, both of which will have 604 students in them. So they'll be larger, actually about 50% larger than the 2 schools there, Colchester and SB Butler. And in order to fill those seats, what we're going to have to do is, and both of those will be magnet schools, so I think what you're going to see is there will be some students who will be attracted, hopefully, from the Northeast community. So I think Northeast Academy will level off to the goal of about 20. And the building that will be at the Cutler site and the building that will be at the West Side site, both of which will be magnet schools, will help to balance that. And we will have, even if 500 families, which we hope is going to happen, move into town, we will have more than enough elementary, middle, and high school facilities to accommodate that.
I have a question, or actually just more of a comment regarding the asbestos removal. And if the asbestos at SB Butler is encased, and if it is not friable, I prefer we not go in there and waste the money on it, because the building will probably be sold. And as is the case with some of our other buildings that we are selling hopefully very soon, we have applied for grants to remove that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So I would,
Yeah, okay.
I would much rather spend the money on a building where the asbestos is
We agree.
out there and open and get it
Yeah.
taken care of fully. So my instinct would be to remove that one, and I don't know if the rest of the council's feeling that way or not. I can only speak for myself, but that's where I am with that.
That is the reason why we are meeting jointly, is so that we have all of these minds together to kind of help us with the town. That's the reason. I would like to recognize Board Member Lee White.
Back to what I asked about. Here's Seema, when you were talking about having all of these extra buildings that are available, as far as the board is, I could be wrong about this, but once we vacate a school, the town then has that building. Even if we would like to use it as storage, we would have to get the okay from the town to do that. There are not, am I right? They're not ours anymore. So,
But once again, having these conversations allows us how we can take a look at our CIP. So I'm appreciative of that.
And I hope we remember we're one town at some level.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Good. I'd like to recognize Representative Gustafson.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of questions in regards to the lead and the water situation. Have we looked into any state or federal grants associated with helping with the cost of lead remediation?
We have, and I've spoken to our state representatives and senator, and if the water that's coming into the building is clean, and we believe it is, then there is no funding available to remediate that.
All right.
In other words, if it's your problem, you've got to fix it.
Right. And then this may have been mentioned at previous meetings. Have all the schools been tested, like all the elementary schools especially, or just certain ones?
No, we tested all of them.
And they all came back pretty
Yes.
good. And has there been any thought into maybe posting the results on a website, like Groton Town's website, just so, you know, parents might be concerned about that. They can log on and say, hey,
sure.
Here's the results, and
Yeah,
they came back good.
We could do that, sure.
Just to address that, I have asked for an agenda item to happen where we are going to have like a full sort of where we've been, what got us here, where we've been, and what we have done, and that I think that we plan to either put it on the Groton Board of Ed or the town website to make that happen. So we do plan to have a committee of the whole meeting where we're having that whole conversation.
Thank you.
Do Councilor Aubry or Councilor Schmidt wish to ask any questions at this point?
My question was, oh, like you couldn't hear me. Okay. My question is, don't we have portable classrooms? Well, wouldn't it seem like it would make sense to take some of these portable classrooms, put them where you want to have your storage, and then you've taken care of your problem?
We do use some of the
Well,
we've actually moved a couple, Leanne.
Yeah.
Because we for example, at Charles Barnum, we needed a couple of different extra classrooms. So we physically moved the portable and it's now being used for that.
Okay. Well, if
but when the new schools are built, that's a very good idea.
Well, that's what I would go towards, maybe come up with an interim where, you're allowed to use something. I know it's a nuisance to move twice, but then you'd have your portable classrooms, you put it where you want it, it stays there, and you have permanent storage. The other thing that I wanted to mention, now, two of the schools, West Side and Cutler, those are both being taken down in the course of the other, the build-out, right?
Right.
Okay. So that eliminates those schools. The other schools, I think what you should recognize is that there's not a great deal of value when somebody buys a school. So there's not a lot of profit. So if anybody thinks you're going to get real money out of selling a school, it isn't going to happen. It's usually just a token amount. The investor is taking it and taking on the problems that go with it. So yeah, if we can not do what we have to do, but the others just leave it be, because when it's sold, that's part of what's negotiated. But you're looking at pennies on a dollar for a school. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that, you could sell a school and make money. This isn't going to happen. We're just happy to have an investor come, have a program they want to do, and we get it on the tax rolls. And we start to see the base go up. Those were the couple of things I was thinking about.
And I was just concerned with the storage that you have. What is it that's being stored? Is it obsolete equipment, obsolete furniture? Is there no way that can be somehow disposed of other than keeping it forever?
Most of the stuff that's stored in that building is reusable and in good condition, but there are items that we have to set aside and store until it goes through the process through the town. Anything that we have within the schools that we would like to get rid of has to go back to the town, because the town essentially bought it. So there's a website that there's an online auction that the town is posting these things on. So they need to be stored while we're waiting for somebody to either buy them or to be determined to be obsolete and of no value.
So it would be short-term storage?
Some of it is. A lot of it is long-term, though. We have records for 50 years.
I'd like to recognize Representative Kotowski.
Thank you. I have a comment, and then I have a question about the grants revenue. It looks like this proposal, even though I understand this is not the board's proposal, this is the superintendent's proposal, is increasing between the CIPs and the Board of Ed budget $4,827,714. Okay, wow, all right? And last month at the RTM meeting, we were told by the town manager and the finance director that the taxes have gone up in Groton the past 4 years, 20.07%. Wow, that's a lot of money. I don't see any effort so far tonight from the Board of Ed to reduce spending, staff, or programs. I don't think this budget is realistic, and this level of spending is not sustainable. My goal for the 2020 budget is a total mill increase of 2%, which I think is reasonable, realistic, and affordable. So I wouldn't support this budget at all. I'm just one vote on the RTM, but I wouldn't support it. Hopefully, when you have more budget meetings, you'll scale back and get it down to something that's more appropriate for the taxpayers. Okay, my second thing about the grants. Now, over the years, you have talked a lot about the grants, especially the magnet school grants and the Department of Defense grants. And as far as the magnet school grants, I believe that when you were asked the question, what happens when the grant ends to the staff, you said that you're going to fold the staff into the budget. My question is, what will you be decreasing in order to do that? My second question is, regarding all of these grants, when they end, what happens to the service or to the equipment or whatever we're getting out of it.
Well, in the case of the middle school grant, we bought a lot of equipment. We've done a lot of training of teachers, and when the 5-year grant is over, that's the end. And those teachers will be trained, and the equipment will be in the building, and you know, of course, we'll try to get more grants, but as far as that is concerned, that will be over. In the case of the Department of Defense Education Activity Grant, like the Writers Grant, we knew we had Teachers College folks for 5 years. We will have had them for 5 years. We are making sure our reading specialists go and attend all of those things so we can sustain the program. But when the grant goes away, the Teachers College folks will go away. That's the way we've designed all of our grants. The grants are not designed so that we would maintain them as part of an addition to the budget.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes, and I know Councilor Heed has a question, then I had a question as well.
Maybe, well, this is just a quick question also. On the textbooks, you're going from 45,000 this past year and the year before, 40, 50 to 150. And obviously you need new textbooks, I understand that.
Right.
I had asked a question a while back, maybe not entirely relevant right now, but how do we vet our school books to make sure that they're not full of indoctrination?
We have a, Dr. Ackerman, stand up. We have a very vigorous curriculum committee that vets these books, and by statute, the board has to approve them. Many of our resources now are electronic, but they go through the same vetting process. Yeah, we don't want that. In fact, that's a key element of digital literacy. What is the credibility of this source that we're providing? But you're right about we need to increase the budget, and the reason we need to increase the budget is because many of you may remember last year we received a $600,000 grant through the Alliance District last year. We didn't get any money this year. So what we did last year was we bought as many books as we possibly could have from that grant. So this year, it looks like we have very little money in textbooks. Well, we actually, to be truthful, we bought those books. But now we don't have any money this year to do that again. So we need to replenish that textbook account for next year, hence the increase.
Representative Richards?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I had a question on page 2.6 about the electricity and heating. It looks like the propane and natural gas budget is going up about 100%. And I was curious as to why that was, and that also raises some concerns for me. I was wondering if renewable energy resources like solar power are considered for our current schools. Are they going to be a part of the new schools, the middle school, the elementary schools? And one of the reasons why my concern is heightened is because of recent events. My father lives in Newport, Rhode Island, and was recently out of natural gas for a week. The schools were closed there for a week. Businesses were closed there because the pipelines were under-pressurized, and that was the choice of the company there to just shut off all of these households, including the schools. So heavily dependent, having our schools heavily dependent on something like that does worry me.
You want to talk about the electricity?
Yeah, I got it. The propane account is up considerably. That's because the budget didn't contemplate, we converted 3 schools in total now to propane, and the budget didn't properly contemplate that. And then the heating oil, the costs did go up significantly. We had a very good contract in FY18, and that we weren't able to get the same. We did as well as we could, but they did get the same for 19, so there was a significant increase. And so those two things are somewhat offsetting, but there was an increase due to the increase in heating oil.
Just since Representative Richards mentioned the new school buildings, 2 things on those. We have, the buildings are going to have the clips for future installation of panels. And we have somebody who used to work for Deep, I think, who's watching for the next time microgrid grants come up, and we're going to be trying to pay attention to that. Second thing with the new buildings, I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that the town and the city have waived the inspection fees for the new buildings, but Paquonic Bridge has not waived the inspection fees for the new buildings. So that money will be coming out of the school bond money, correct? And we're looking at $300,000?
$300,000.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought it was in here. What did you not hear?
The Quantico
Yes.
Fire Department has a fee. There's an ordinance that construction fee, about 1/3 of 1% of the construction. And so the Permanent School Building Committee requested a waiver of that, but the Fire Department Board rejected it. And so the project will have to absorb $300,000. Either we'll have to cut $300,000 from the building, or we'll have to add $300,000 overage.
Councilor, you have Councilor Oakley.
And we also have one board member, too, Jay Wydlaf.
Just wanted to follow up on that question. Who wrote that ordinance? That's.
I don't know.
Paquonic Bridge that did themselves.
Could you repeat that, please?
Paquonic Bridge Fire, they have the, fire departments have the ability to adopt ordinances. That's their own ordinance.
So Leanne.
Councilor Obrey, and then
I would recognize.
Okay. Just quickly, something we talked about, well, I asked about last year, and I'm going to ask about it again this year. Have you thought about doing a survey for how many children are actually going to use the buses so that you could cut back on your buses? All of us know that there's very few kids on a bus, especially the high school, middle schools. There's hardly anybody on a bus. And it would seem to me like you could do a survey of the parents and find out who's going to use it, and then adjust accordingly, rather than driving basically empty buses around.
Well, I must say, after 19 years as superintendent, I know a little bit about buses.
I'm sure you do.
And we buy buses for elementary kids. In other words, we have 3 bus runs. High school kids don't ride the bus very much. The middle school kids ride a fair amount, and they're fairly well. But to get kids around town, especially now that we have magnet schools, that's the problem. And the other problem is this. You do sometimes see, even with an elementary, only, say, 15 or 20 children on the bus. The problem is the bus might have to go over to Groton Long Point and pick up here, pick up here. It's really a time issue. It's not that we can't stuff 50 kids on a bus. It's that we can't pick up 50 kids in less than an hour and 45 minutes. So when you look at buses, your observation is, I hear it frequently, especially from my wife, that the buses don't seem to have many kids on them, and that's the reason. If we like to keep the bus under an hour. It's a long time for a child, an hour one way, an hour the other way. And obviously, we need sufficient number of buses, but we have, what, like 47 buses, if I'm not mistaken. So we hire 47 buses, and we need 47 buses to carry the little kids. And we have some magnet buses that go out of town and so forth. But that's the frustrating problem. But we are looking at it, I can assure you, and Learn is looking, our Regional Education Resource Center, they're looking to regionalize perhaps special ed transportation. So we're always looking at that. But it's a $5 million account. So you're talking, you're talking about the right thing. It's a huge investment. Getting 5,000 kids around this town, it's a big town, is an expensive proposition. Right. We take
You do have a staff person that's what
we
they do, correct?
We do, and we have a software. That's quite helpful.
Yeah.
And of course, in the military community, you can imagine bus number 52 starts with these kids, and then all of a sudden, it's not those kids anymore, it's these other kids, and so I mean, we are literally redoing our enrollment on buses on a daily basis.
I would like to recognize Jay.
I just want to make a quick comment about the Quantic Bridge Fire Department. I don't live in the district, and so when I first heard about these fees, I was frankly shocked. That was like my initial opinion. But then I began to think about, they cover quite a few government buildings that I assume there's no fees on. I mean, Town Hall, Fitch Middle, the library, and I don't know what this building, I don't know, are we still in Quantic Bridge up here?
Yes.
Fitch High School?
I think so.
The
Fitch High
Police
School, for
Department?
sure.
So they have quite a burden, it would seem to me, as a fire district that maybe is a little bit more than the other fire districts in town. I'm just thinking out loud before, because my initial idea was this is ridiculous, but you've got all of that to consider, and I don't know what their actual costs are and what they're mandated to do during the construction process of the middle school, but should the Pequannock Bridge Fire District taxpayers foot the bill for a building that's for the whole town? So that's just something to think about before, before we come down one side or the other. And I'm not even sure that 300,000 figure is final. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
And we have Councilor Parker, and then I think we're at limit.
I think so.
Councilor Parker.
I was just going to make a comment about the bus transportation. The bus transportation, they did cut back on some because there's bus hubs for the magnet kids. So those kids are on the bus for maybe an hour and 20 minutes, an hour 25. And believe me, I know that for a very good fact. And they have a bunch, it's not just the high school students, it's the elementary and the middle school students who are going over to the magnet schools. So you have a mixed group on the same bus sometimes. And a bunch of the kids are going over there at the same time, just to give a heads up. But I don't know about throughout town, but we got people going back and forth, like from Northeast End, maybe going over to Catherine Kanowski, vice versa. So I know they're trying their best on getting that straightened out.
Thank you.
Possible to have one more RTM member speak, or is it?
Yes. And at that point, may we close the meeting?
Okay, Representative Bordelon, we'll have the last question.
I just wanted to thank everybody for the meeting. It was very productive, and I think there's a lot of information, and hopefully more collaboration can be done to work on this, because it's such a big budget, and I think it takes more time than we actually realize. With looking at it, though, I just once again want to state that I hope that we are funding and making sure that we're trying to close achievement gaps in our district. As one of our focus, we can look at dollar signs and looking at the percents. I would love to see the number and the percent of money that actually goes per pupil actual to the students in reference to the bigger pot. That when we look at salaries, they're very important, but it's really important to make sure our students are getting what they need and what they deserve from the district, and really working towards closing those achievement gaps over the higher classes in this district, because the number one purpose that a school was meant is to make sure that they can read, write, and move on to work and go to college. Looking at this as well, I'm a big supporter of making sure that we have career readiness programs as well. I'm a firm believer, I'll say it again, in an ROTC program. We are an alliance district, we are military based, we have the Coast Guard. I know students up there that would really love to have an ROTC program. And then my last piece was, it was stated, if I understood it correctly, that some of the funds from the DODEA are being used towards the IB program at the high school, and it was applicable because the high school has more than 20% of military students, or whatever. Is that correct?
That's right. The
Yeah,
DODEA
okay.
program.
But just to get clear on the ROTC program, that program is no longer being offered by the federal government. It's not available. So it's not open. So though we would love to have it, and we would try to make a budget, per your request, we actually looked into it, and in the investigation, we realized that there is no more.
I did get back to
ROTC.
me, but we would have to, what my understanding that you actually told me was that it have to be self-funded, that it still exists.
It wouldn't be a lot.
All right, so it would be a starter program to get ready for one, and we could apply for funds after, but we'd have to self-fund it. Okay, so anyway, it still would be a great thing to have to try to get forward. And I'm just curious as to how many military students are using the IB program in this district if we're using the DODIA funds for that. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank the board and staff for coming out and presenting this, and I wanted to thank moderator and the Education Committee and all the members that came out. I think this is a productive meeting for everybody to voice their opinions. It's a good first step. Having said that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn from the Town Council.
Make a motion.
Moved
I
by
make a motion.
Schmidt, seconded by Parker.
Yes.
All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, so moved unanimously. We are adjourned.
So I would also accept a motion for the Board of Ed to end the special meeting from Rosemary. Do I have a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.